There are moments in K-pop history that feel like accidents, beautiful, unplanned collisions of talent that somehow become something far greater than anyone anticipated. EXO-CBX was one of those moments. But the deeper you look into their story, the more you realize that nothing about them was accidental at all. Long before the world knew their name as a trio, Chen, Baekhyun, and Xiumin were already the quiet architects of EXO's emotional core. While other members carried the group's visual identity or performance dominance, these three were the ones holding the sound together, the voices that made EXO's harmonies ache in all the right places. Fans noticed. The industry noticed. And eventually, SM Entertainment noticed too. But here's what most people don't talk about: the risk involved in launching EXO-CBX in the first place. It was October 2016, and EXO as a whole was already one of the biggest acts on the planet. Releasing a sub-unit meant dividing attention, dividing resources, and, most dangerously, dividing the fandom's energy. There were real questions being asked behind closed doors. Would EXO-L support a smaller version of the group they love? Would casual fans even follow 3 members instead of 12? What happened next surprised almost everyone. Hey Mama didn't just chart, it announced the arrival of a completely different artistic identity. The song was playful, retro-drenched, and dripping with a theatrical confidence that felt unlike anything SM had put out in years. There were brass arrangements. There was swing. There was an almost jazz cafe warmth that seemed to belong to a different era, and yet it felt completely modern, completely alive. Critics who had spent years dismissing K-pop as a manufactured genre stopped and listened. That was the first sign that EXO-CBX wasn't just a side project. It was a statement. What made this sub-unit so rare wasn't simply the music, it was the chemistry. In a group as large as EXO, individual personalities can sometimes get lost beneath the weight of synchronized choreography and group-first branding. But in CBX, something intimate and unguarded emerged. Baekhyun's theatrical flair, Chen's raw emotional delivery, and Xiumin's understated elegance created a dynamic that fans described as watching 3 best friends perform for the sheer joy of it. There was laughter in the music. There was freedom in the performances. And for many EXO-Ls, following CBX felt less like supporting a sub-unit and more like being let in on a secret. Their second mini-album, Blooming Days, released in 2018, pushed that identity even further. The title track carried an almost European pop sensibility, breezy, romantic, sophisticated, while deeper cuts on the album revealed a group willing to experiment with R&B textures, acoustic vulnerability, and layered vocal arrangements that most mainstream acts would never dare to attempt. The album wasn't just received well. It was celebrated. It debuted at the top of the Gaon album chart and proved beyond any remaining doubt that EXO-CBX had built a fanbase that was fiercely and independently devoted to them. But then the world changed, and so did everything around CBX. The years that followed brought challenges that no amount of talent could have fully prepared them for. Military enlistments began pulling EXO's full lineup apart, as they do for all Korean male artists at a certain point in their careers. The global pandemic reshaped the entire entertainment industry. And perhaps most significantly, the internal landscape of SM Entertainment itself began to shift in ways that would eventually send shockwaves far beyond the company's walls. For a period, the future of EXO-CBX, and indeed EXO itself, felt genuinely uncertain. What fans held onto during those quiet years was the memory of what CBX had already given them. Concert footage rewatched thousands of times. Live performances that circulated endlessly across social media because the vocal runs were simply too extraordinary to stop sharing. Fan accounts that documented every behind-the-scenes moment, every laugh shared between the 3 of them on variety shows, every small gesture that confirmed what everyone watching already felt, that the bond between Chen, Baekhyun, and Xiumin was real in a way that transcended performance. And then, just when the silence felt permanent, the conversation around EXO-CBX reignited, not with a comeback announcement, but with something more complicated, more human, and ultimately more powerful. The legal and contractual tensions that became public knowledge surrounding EXO members in recent years cast a long shadow. Baekhyun and Xiumin, both central figures in those disputes, became symbols of a broader conversation happening across the Korean entertainment industry about artist rights, contract transparency, and the evolving relationship between agencies and the people who make them successful. It was uncomfortable, it was messy, and it made their story matter in a way that went far beyond music. Through all of it, the love from fans never wavered. If anything, it deepened. EXOL, long regarded as one of the most passionate and organized fandoms in K-pop history, rallied around CBX with a protectiveness that was almost parental. Support projects, fan letters, streaming campaigns, the community showed up in every way it knew how. And in doing so, they reminded everyone watching that the relationship between an artist and their audience, when it's genuine, can withstand almost anything the industry throws at it. The story of EXO-CBX is ultimately a story about what happens when artistry refuses to be contained by expectation. They debuted as a subunit when subunits were still a gamble. They made music that didn't follow the K-pop playbook when following it would have been the safer choice. They became more than a project, they became a chapter of their own within one of the greatest stories in modern pop music. And in an industry that often rewards conformity over courage, that means something profound. There are still chapters to be written, comebacks yet to be announced, stages yet to be claimed. But whatever comes next for Chen, Baekhyun, and Schumann, together or apart, the foundation they built as EXO-CBX will remain one of the most quietly extraordinary achievements in K-pop's history. Not because of the numbers, not because of the awards, but because for a generation of fans who grew up listening to them, those three voices became the sound of something that felt, against all odds, completely and unmistakably real.